For today's video, I'm going to show you a start to finish install for the Garmin Echomap 73SV. This guide will work for any fish finders that have a transom mounted transducer. The boat I'm installing to in this case is a fiberglass boat, but I've actually used the same exact setup in an aluminum boat and it worked really well. For installing the transducer, I'm going to be using one of these stern pads. Basically, they're a block of composite material that has double-sided tape that gets affixed to your transom, and then you install the transducer to the stern pad. That way you're not drilling into your boat. For mounting the fish finder itself, I want to make sure I have adjustability options, so I'm going to be using this ram mount that came off the previous fish finder that was installed on this boat. First thing I'm going to do is unbox the fish finder, take out the transducer, get that installed to the transom, run our wires, and get everything mounted up. All right, let's open this up and see what we got inside. This little Garmin cover here. Oh yeah, this is a great size. I'm really happy with this. I was a little worried it was going to be too small going from the 9 to the 7, but this is actually a great screen size for up in the cockpit area. Oh yeah, this is going to be spot on. This is our mount. I'm hoping it's going to work. Oh, it might not work on this mount here. We'll get to that in a little bit. So this is a trolling motor transducer mount. You would mount your transducer here. It would go on the bottom of your trolling motor, get strapped down. And then we have the transducer mount part 2. And this should be the transducer. Oh yeah. This is a huge transducer. This is the mount template for the transducer if you were going to drill directly into your boat. Power cable, yeah, power cable. And then of course the instruction manual and a couple more installation screws. Let's get started. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start back here on the transom. Basically, I want to get the transducer installed first, run our cable up front, and then we'll deal with all the mounting and wiring up near the console. So first thing we need to do is attach the mount to the transducer. You got a piece that attaches to the transducer itself, and then the piece that attaches to your boat so you can adjust the angle. So this part's pretty simple. It goes around the wire here. All of the screw holes match up. The screws and hardware are included in the bag. You've got a locking washer and a screw for each hole. So I'm going to throw the little lock washer into each screw hole, and then a screw into each lock washer. And now you are dealing with plastic, so don't over tighten this. You don't want to crack anything, especially on this transducer. These extra screw holes down here are for the trolling motor mount, but we're not going to be using that today. Now that that's installed, we can focus on our mount. Now I'm hoping to fit this in the cubby hole right here, but it is a little bit too big. So what I'm going to do is cut this down to size. Basically, I'm going to use this as a template, cut the pad down to just the width of the bracket here so it'll fit nicely in this cubby hole. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this down real quick. Okay, so I had to cut off a little bit more than I expected, but to get it to fit up here nicely, it just needed a little bit more trimming. Next up, I'm gonna go ahead and get the transom cleaned off with some rubbing alcohol. That will prep the surface for the 3M tape. I'm just gonna go ahead and apply this, and then mounting the transducer itself will be super easy. We just need some small screws to screw into it. Use the pad here and wipe this down. This is really important if you have this area of your transom waxed or any kind of shine products, or if it's just dirty. You really want a nice, solid, smooth connection with no contaminants to mess with the adhesive. Now, the only thing this kit doesn't come with that I kind of wish it did was screws to attach your transducer, but I understand that a lot of transducers are different, so having the right hardware might not always work out. The big thing you want to make sure is that your screws do not penetrate the stern pad. As you can see, these do not, and I'm going to have the transducer on top of it, so it's going to sit more like that. Do not pre-drill. That will weaken your screws connection. So you want to go ahead and just screw right into the stern pad when you're ready. Okay, with the backing peeled off, I'm going to go ahead and fit it into place. Once you press this down, it's kind of in place. So just be very gentle with your first placement to make sure you have it where you want, and then press it down when you're ready to stick it. Okay, this looks good.
Hey, you working in there?
I am.
Your damn phone?
I don't. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and get this screw started here. I'm putting it right in the center here, that way I can raise it up higher if I need to, or lower it if I need to. Basically, you just wanna make sure that it is under, or at least even with the bottom of the boat, so it's not dragging behind it. I think we're in a pretty good position for that. Before I fully install this, I'm gonna go ahead and install the locking mechanism for the angle adjustment. This is pretty simple. You've got one bolt that goes in the one side with a rubber washer. like that with the rubber washer. And then there's a slot for a nut on the other side, which just sits in there. This goes through. And then once you've set your angle, this will lock it in place. But you don't have to crank it down too hard because this is also a kickback feature. So just in case you happen to strike something with the transducer, this will loosen up some and allow it to kick up rather than breaking your mount off. Angle that up some. Probably gonna want it like that. You always want your transducer angled slightly up because when you're in the water, your boat sits a little bit higher, and then when you're moving, you know, you're digging down a little bit even further. Okay, that looks pretty good. Go ahead and tighten these screws down. And we are installed. Now, the cool part that comes with the kit is it has these wire routing clips with some more 3M tape. I may be able to utilize this wire clip to kind of route the transducer wire over here, and then we can turn it up to go up the boat. I'm gonna wipe down the area with some rubbing alcohol. Attach this 3M tape. Get this attached. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and apply the 3M tape to the last wire clip and get this wire routed to the top of the boat, and then we can start routing the transducer cable to the fish finder. Okay, so at this point I have the transducer installed to the transom. The cable is routed up and around the boat. It comes in through the underdeck side here, down the side of the boat, and then I ran it up and out of the hole that was already drilled from the previous transducer install. At the same time, I also ran a duplex cable for power and negative from the battery. It's best to directly wire a fish finder to your battery. That way you're eliminating all kinds of interference that could happen if you tap into an electrical system. This is just some 12 gauge wire I had. This is probably overkill for the fish finder, but this is going to be dedicated power directly to the fish finder. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and wire up the positive negative wires from the power cable here. Tuck this all under the deck, and then I'm going to get ready for installing my mount. And right now, since I have my power and transducer cables ready to go, I really just need to focus on the mount. It didn't really work for the swivel plate that came with the Garmin, but I was able to use a piece of ABS plastic and bolt it through so I could connect it all up. So with that being done, now this swivels on the mount. I'm going to be able to reuse this whole unit without having to buy a new mount. So I'm really happy I was able to do that. So I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to cut a base plate. I'm going to use that base plate to cover up all the old screw holes, and then I'm going to mount this through the base plate onto the boat. I wanted to make sure that this fiberglass was well and protected once we get everything installed. All right, so at this point I've had a couple different revisions here, and I think I've landed on the one I want to go with. Basically, I started with this one here, which was a smaller base plate. I was able to get it all set up, and I thought I was going to go with this, so I even pre-drilled some holes. And when you center it on here, it fits absolutely perfect to cover everything up. However, to run the wires, you actually need to offset it. And when you do that, you're either covering up not enough on one side or not enough on the other, so that didn't work. Next, I tried a larger plate. This one I didn't have to cut all the way through. I was able to do something similar. And when it was offset, it held everything pretty well, but I didn't really like how much I had to offset it. So what I wound up doing was extending the hole on the base plate here to fit the two wires up close. So that way, instead of having to offset it the length of two wires, it was only the length of one wire since they can both tuck up. When I figured that out, I didn't need this large cutout here. So I wound up making one more. And on this one, I enlarged the hole a little bit so I can center it even better on the base plate. So now for the final revision, it's going to look something like this. The wires are going to tuck all the way into the mount like this. Rather than being side by side, they can actually tuck up sideways. And then the mount is going to sit roughly in this position. I'm really happy with how this turned out. Now, what I'm going to do is go ahead and run some silicone under this plate here. That should waterproof everything under it. Then I'm going to run some silicone under the base plate here. And then when I have everything in place, I'm going to drill all new holes and then run some screws into the side here to get this going. Throw some silicone down, throw some screws in, and then we'll get to mounting everything up. All right, with the base plate mounted, the last thing is just to hook everything up. Let's go ahead and get our mount together, slap it on here, and see how it all looks. Go ahead and get that clipped on. Next, we have our Garmin. This is going to include the swivel. The cool thing is that this has tilt and swivel, so we should have everything we need to get going here. Now we can install the screen mount. These slide into the holders right here. There's slots for them. There we go. And then now finally, we get to install our screen. For the transducer cable, it comes with this attachment with a little O-ring. This will break off its thing here and clamp around the transducer cable. So we got our cable. We're gonna put the O-ring on top first, and then these two pieces will slide around, and then now you can screw this into the back of the screen. I think this is to make routing the cable easier. I'm not really sure why this one's disconnected and the power one isn't. And then finally the power cable, this just screws on. And there it is. First time turning it on. Oh man, I'm super excited to get back into this. I'm gonna go ahead and do some updates. Basically, you just pair your phone to this and it should all work through your phone. And then outside of that, we should be good to go. Awesome, awesome, awesome.